Hey Gavin, go fetch some more gravy. And make sure it's actually piping hot this time. When I snap my fingers, you move. I froze in the middle of the grand opulent dining room of our historic Tudor mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. In my hands, I held an empty, pristine white Wedgwood porcelain platter. Still ringing in my ears was the sharp, metallic snap of fingers, a sound delivered with the effortless, grating arrogance of Preston, my older brother, and the undisputed golden child of the family. He had just snapped at me while laughing with his three Wall Street buddies, who were sitting around our dinner table in their bespoke striped charcoal suits, swirling glasses of a $500 Pinot Noir. I slowly turned my head, staring directly into Preston's smug, shiny face. He had one leg casually crossed over the mahogany dining chair, swirling his wineglass with a lazy grin, completely treating me like a hired caterer who was being paid by the hour to fetch his sauces. "Preston," I said, my voice flat, running cold through the silent room. "Who exactly do you think you're snapping your fingers at?" My mother, Meredith Cole, immediately slammed her silver fork onto her plate with a sharp, piercing clang. She narrowed her perfectly microbladed eyebrows, glaring at me with an expression of sheer disgust, as if my very presence had left an unsightly grease stain on her imported Belgian linen tablecloth. "Gavin, will you drop that ridiculous, insolent attitude?" Mother hissed through her teeth, her voice low but laced with old money venom, careful not to embarrass Preston in front of his important Wall Street colleagues. "It is Thanksgiving, and Preston is the guest of honor tonight, along with his key partners. All you have to do is go into the kitchen, warm up the gravy, and bring it out. Why must you always make a dramatic scene out of absolutely everything? Are you seriously trying to ruin our family gathering with that sullen, miserable face of yours?" My father, Charles Cole, gave a curt nod of agreement. He took a slow sip of his Cabernet Sauvignon, then leisurely sliced into the golden-brown, herb-crusted turkey on his plate. "Charles is right, Gavin," Father said in his booming, retired litigator voice. "You're his younger brother. He asked you for a simple favor, and you're acting as if he's asking for your kidney. Besides, this entire 12-course feast tonight, if your mother and I hadn't graciously allowed you to use our $200,000 kitchen, where else would you have the chance to show off your little cooking hobby? You should be grateful we still give you a seat in this house." I looked at the three of them, my father, my mother, and the golden boy, Preston Cole. They were seated around a massive, solid mahogany table under a towering, brilliant baccarat crystal chandelier that cast a warm, golden glow over the entire room. On the table lay a flawless culinary masterpiece that I had spent 12 grueling hours in the kitchen preparing. From the organic turkey roasted with fresh sage and basted in clarified garlic butter, the velvety Yukon gold potatoes whipped with white truffles, the roasted butternut squash soup topped with toasted hazelnuts, to the warm, fragrant pecan tarts cooling on the sideboard. I had driven to the artisanal markets at 5 in the morning, meticulously hand-selected every single ingredient, prepped, cooked, and washed every heavy pan, only to be rewarded with a demeaning snap of my brother's fingers and the cold, ungrateful dismissal of my parents. "Yeah, Gavin," Preston sneered, raising his voice so his Wall Street friends could hear. "What was the point of you going to culinary school in New York, if you can't even serve your own family on holidays? We're in the middle of discussing a $10 million hedge fund merger here. These are macro-level financial concepts that your kitchen-dwelling brain couldn't possibly comprehend. Stop wasting our time, go heat up the gravy, and do your job as the family's holiday chef." Preston's three friends chuckled behind their hands. One of them deliberately pushed his empty plate to the edge of the table, tapping his manicured fingers on the polished wood. "Hey, little bro," the friend smirked. "If you don't mind, could you bring out some more of that garlic butter asparagus, too?" It was actually surprisingly decent. My chest rose and fell. A hot, roaring fire of anger flared up in my chest, but I immediately suppressed it, replacing it with an icy, razor-sharp clarity. I looked at the Wedgwood platter in my hand, then at my mother, who was busy offering a sweet, apologetic smile to Preston's prestigious guests, completely ignoring the fact that her own son had just been publicly humiliated like a common servant. I didn't say a single word. Slowly, deliberately, I set the empty porcelain platter down on a side table. I reached behind my back, untied my heavy gray canvas apron, the one embroidered with the logo of the Michelin-starred restaurant where I ran the kitchen, folded it neatly into a perfect square, and placed it gently on the empty chair next to my father. "Gavin, what on earth are you doing?" Mother demanded, her voice rising in sharp irritation as she watched my silent, calculated movements. I am not fetching any gravy, I said, my voice incredibly calm, devoid of any anger or tremor, and I am not cleaning up a single dish in that kitchen tonight. Preston slammed his hand on the table, standing up so fast his chair screeched against the hardwood floor. His face was flushed red with anger and alcohol. How dare you speak like that? Preston yelled. Who do you think you are in this mansion? Without Mom and Dad's roof over your head, you're nothing but a pathetic, grease-covered line cook sweating in some miserable kitchen in Manhattan. Preston, sit down, Father commanded, but his eyes locked onto me, cold and disciplinary. Gavin, you are being incredibly stubborn and disrespectful. Apologize to your brother and our guests right now, and finish your duties tonight. Do not make me repeat myself. My duties? I let out a soft, humorless laugh. A laugh that carried the weight of 10 years of silent accumulated resentment. Since when did cooking a holiday dinner for my family become my servant duties? Since when did I become an unpaid maid for these arrogant trust fund snobs? I looked directly into my father's eyes, the man who was always so deeply obsessed with the Greenwich old money heritage, but treated his second son like an embarrassing stain on the family crest. I'm leaving, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my car keys. Consider tonight's dinner my final gift to this family. From this moment on, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any other holiday, feel free to cook for yourselves or hire outside catering. I officially resign as the Cole family's holiday chef. I turned around and walked out of the dining room, my footsteps echoing on the cold quartz tiles of the grand foyer. Behind me, Preston's furious shouting, my mother's shrill voice calling me ungrateful and selfish, and my father's heavy, disappointed sigh faded into the background. The massive, solid oak front door of the Greenwich mansion slammed shut behind me, cutting off the warm crystal light of the dining room. Outside, Connecticut's first winter snow was beginning to drift down from a black sky. The freezing wind whipped against my face, but as I walked to my car, a feeling of absolute, intoxicating freedom washed over me for the first time in my life. I drove my Jeep Grand Cherokee down the dark, snow-slicked lanes of Interstate 95, heading south toward New York City. The yellow highway lights reflected off the wet windshield as my mind drifted back through the last 10 years of my life, a series of painful, unfair memories that played out like a black and white documentary. The Cole family of Greenwich, Connecticut, was the absolute definition of old money. My father, Charles Cole, was a retired, highly prominent litigation attorney, and my mother came from a wealthy real estate dynasty in New England. In their household, everything had to be curated to absolute perfection. The lawn had to be manicured to exactly 2 inches, and their children were expected to attend Ivy League universities before taking up high-powered corporate roles in the glass towers of Wall Street. Preston was the perfect son in their eyes. He graduated from Wharton, joined a top-tier venture capital firm in Boston, wore bespoke suits from Savile Row, and married Bianca, the daughter of a prominent Massachusetts politician. Every time Preston entered the house, my parents' faces lit up as if he brought a holy aura with him. They talked endlessly about his million-dollar mergers, his golf club memberships in Palm Beach, and his brilliant, flawless future. And then there was me. I was the stubborn, creative rebel who fell in love with culinary arts at a young age. Instead of applying to Yale as my father had demanded, I secretly applied to the Culinary Institute of America, CIA, in Hyde Park, New York. I remembered the day I announced my decision in the Greenwich living room 6 years ago. My mother had wept as if I had just confessed to a felony, and my father had smashed his expensive crystal whiskey glass on the hearth. A chef? Father had roared, his face purple with anger and shame. No one in the Cole family has ever worked in manual labor. You want to be a servant, carrying plates and washing dishes for wealthy people? You went to prep school just to learn how to chop onions and sweep kitchen floors? Mother had sobbed into her silk tissue, her voice shaking with disappointment. Gavin, do you have any idea how embarrassed I will be when the ladies at the country club ask about you? Mother had wept. What am I supposed to say? That my son is sweating over a hot stove in some smoke-filled kitchen in New York? Look at your brother, Preston. He was just promoted to vice president of his firm at 27, and you want to be a manual laborer. From that day on, I was officially exiled. My parents cut off all financial support, declaring that if I wanted to pursue such a lowly blue-collar job, I could pay for my own tuition and rent. They fully expected me to starve under the financial pressure of New York, and come crawling back, begging for their forgiveness and a law school application. But they completely underestimated me. I survived New York on my own. I worked 80 hours a week, starting from the absolute bottom of the kitchen hierarchy. I washed greasy dishes, peeled endless sacks of potatoes, and scrubbed slippery kitchen floors during grueling shifts that lasted from 6 in the morning until 2 the next night. My arms became a map of burns from hot cast iron pans, and my fingers carried deep scars from the frantic pace of chopping under the intense pressure of Michelin-starred dinner rushes. I lived in a damp, cramped basement apartment in Brooklyn, where the thunderous rumble of the subway running underneath shook my tiny single bed every single night. My parents completely ignored my life in New York. They never once called to ask if I had enough food to eat, or if I was warm enough in the winter. But every time Thanksgiving, Christmas, or a family anniversary rolled around, my mother would send me a demanding, one-sided text message. Gavin, we are hosting a dinner for 30 guests tomorrow. Make sure you drive up early to prepare the menu. Remember to make the herb-crusted lamb racks and the chocolate mousse that Preston likes. Do not be late and ruin the family's evening. And I, desperately craving even a shred of their love, hoping that if I cooked well enough, if I sacrificed enough of my time, they would finally see my worth and appreciate me, had always agreed. I would drive for hours, bringing expensive ingredients paid for out of my own meager paychecks, only to stand in the Greenwich kitchen for 12 hours, cooking like an unpaid private chef, serving their friends while being completely ignored by my own flesh and blood. They ate my five-star creations, but they never once invited me to sit at the main dining table. I was always left to eat a cold piece of sourdough over the kitchen counter after everyone else had finished, or sit alone at the small servants' table in the corner of the pantry. Preston's finger snap tonight had finally shattered that pathetic illusion of family. They didn't want a son or a brother. They wanted a free, high-end servant who carried the Cole name to make their gatherings look prestigious. Well, they had no idea that the grease-covered line cook they had just discarded was about to dismantle their entire world. My Jeep came to a halt in front of a luxury, ultra-modern glass tower in Manhattan's trendy Tribeca neighborhood. I stepped out, the crisp, freezing New York air instantly clearing my mind. I walked past the concierge, took the private keycard elevator, and ascended to the penthouse. This was my 300-square-meter penthouse, offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Hudson River and the glittering Manhattan skyline. Inside, the warm gray cedar floors and floor-to-ceiling glass walls reflected a minimalist, incredibly luxurious living space designed by one of the city's top architects. My parents honestly believed I was a struggling cook drowning in grease. They had absolutely no idea about the massive culinary empire I had built. At 29, I was no longer the broke kid washing dishes in Brooklyn. I was the founder and majority shareholder of Cole Culinary Group, CCG, one of the fastest-growing culinary and hospitality conglomerates in the Northeast. CCG owned 3 Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan and Brooklyn, a network of 12 high-end dining spots stretching from Boston to Washington, D.C., and an elite luxury catering and events company called Aura Dining, which catered exclusively to billionaires, Wall Street executives, and A-list celebrities. But my success didn't stop at restaurants. I also owned CCG Capital, a private equity real estate firm that quietly acquired, renovated, and operated historic buildings and boutique luxury resorts across New England. My personal net worth had comfortably passed the $20 million mark 2 years ago. I sat down on my vintage leather armchair, pouring myself a glass of Macallan 25. The phone on the side table vibrated. It was a call from Marcus Vance, my chief wealth advisor and the managing director of CCG Capital. Happy Thanksgiving. Marcus's warm, professional voice came through the speaker. I hope you had a lovely warm evening with your family in Greenwich. I took a slow sip of my scotch and chuckled dryly. The warmth ended much earlier than expected, Marcus. Do you have the latest financial updates on the Greenwich property? Marcus's tone immediately shifted to a sharp, businesslike demeanor. I have some highly critical news, Gavin. Just as you predicted, the Cole family's finances are completely in free fall. Your brother Preston's venture fund, Cole and Partners, is nothing but an empty shell. They made a series of disastrous, high-risk investments in fraudulent real estate developments and volatile crypto assets earlier this year. To bail out Preston's fund and prevent a federal SEC investigation, your father, Charles Cole, quietly signed a personal guarantee, putting up their historic Greenwich estate Oak Ridge Manor, as collateral for a massive private bridge loan. I leaned back, my eyes narrowing. How much is the loan? $4.2 million, Gavin, Marcus replied. And here is the beautiful part. The private bank that issued the loan quietly packaged their delinquent debt and sold it off to our subsidiary, CCG Estates Holdings, last month. In other words, your company is now the direct creditor of Oak Ridge Manor. They missed their first major balloon payment of $1.2 million last week. Currently, they are desperately hunting for a massive investor to inject capital before the final foreclosure deadline on Christmas Eve. I slowly swirled the golden scotch in my glass, listening to the ice cubes clink against the crystal. It was a beautiful, satisfying sound. Which investor are they targeting? I asked. The hospitality and luxury resort billionaire, Harrison Thorne, Marcus said. Charles and Preston are pulling every string they have to get a meeting with Thorne. They want to convince him to invest $5 million into a new boutique resort project they are pitching. If they close the deal, they will use Thorne's cash to pay off their debt to us and save their family name. But if they fail, they will lose the mansion and face immediate foreclosure and eviction. Harrison Thorne, I laughed. What an absolute stroke of poetic justice. Harrison Thorne wasn't just a world-famous billionaire. He was one of my closest personal friends and the very first investor in my culinary group. Just last week, Harrison and I had dinner in Manhattan to finalize an exclusive deal where CCG would take over and run all the high-end dining concepts in his upcoming luxury hotels across Europe. Do they have a plan to pitch to Thorne? I asked. According to my source inside their firm, Preston convinced Harrison Thorne to attend a private, ultra-exclusive dinner at Oak Ridge Manor on Christmas Eve, Marcus explained. They want to use the luxury of their historic home and a five-star dining experience to charm Thorne into signing a Memorandum of Understanding, MO, before our midnight deadline. A perfect, flawless plan began to crystallize in my mind. I smiled, feeling the rich warmth of the scotch. Marcus, do me a favor, anything, Gavin. Keep our ownership of their debt completely quiet. Do not let anyone in Greenwich know who CCG Estates Holdings really is. And let them prepare for that Christmas Eve dinner. Make sure they have everything set up perfectly. I want to deliver their Christmas gift, personally, right at that dinner table. Understood, Gavin. I will have all the legal foreclosure documents and eviction orders drafted and ready for you. After hanging up, I walked out onto my penthouse balcony. The cold Manhattan wind blew against my face, carrying the distant hum of the city. I looked toward the northeast, where the historic Greenwich Mansion stood, built on a foundation of empty vanity and crushing debt. They had treated me like an invisible servant. They had dismissed my hard-earned passion as lowly manual labor. Well, I was going to let them put on the performance of their lives for Harrison Thorne, and then I was going to pull the curtain down myself. 3 weeks passed after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. I cut off all contact with my family. I completely threw myself into my work, finalizing the corporate merger between CCG Culinary Group and Harrison Thorne's European luxury hotels. The frantic pace of New York City was the perfect distraction, leaving me with almost no time to dwell on the lingering wounds of my past. But life always has a way of dragging you back, especially when those who hurt you finally hit a wall. On a freezing mid-December afternoon, with white snow blanketed across the Manhattan streets, my personal cell phone began to vibrate. I looked at the screen and saw Meredith Cole flashing on the display. My eyebrows shot up. This was the first time my mother had called me since I had folded my apron and walked out of the Greenwich estate. I answered the call and pressed the phone to my ear, but remained silent. My silence was a cold, impenetrable wall. Gavin? Is that you? My mother's voice came through, sounding thin and fragile. The usual haughty, arrogant tone of a Greenwich socialite was completely missing, replaced by a trembling panic that she was desperately trying to mask. Gavin, why haven't you called your father or me in 3 weeks? Do you have any idea how worried we've been? I was under the impression that I was an ungrateful, selfish disappointment who was no longer welcome in Greenwich. I replied smoothly, my voice completely devoid of warmth. I am simply doing exactly what the family wanted, staying out of your sight. Mother gasped lightly, her heavy breathing audible through the receiver. Gavin, about Thanksgiving. Preston had simply had a bit too much to drink, and your father was only stressed about the family reputation. You're my son, Gavin. How can you hold a grudge for this long? Let's put that behind us. We are calling you today because we have an incredibly important matter. I smiled to myself, feeling a deep wave of satisfaction. Just as Marcus had predicted, they had hit a dead end, and they were suddenly remembering my existence because they needed to exploit me again. "What is it, Mother?" I asked, pretending to be completely oblivious. "On Christmas Eve, our family is hosting an incredibly exclusive, private dinner at Oak Ridge Manor," Mother said, her voice trying desperately to sound warm and inviting. "Our guest of honor is Harrison Thorne, the legendary hospitality billionaire. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your brother Preston to secure a massive partnership with him. We will have some of the most prominent real estate developers in New England attending. I need you to drive up to Greenwich early to take full charge of the menu." "You want me to cook?" I asked, letting a dry, sarcastic chuckle slip. "I thought Father said my cooking was a lowly manual labor service that only defiled your $200,000 kitchen?" "Gavin, please stop with that sarcastic tone." Mother's voice snapped with sharp irritation, but she immediately softened her voice, remembering that she was the one begging. I didn't mean it like that. Harrison Thorne is an extremely wealthy, notoriously difficult food critic. He only eats five-star cuisine. Your father and I contacted the top luxury catering companies in Boston and New York, but their menus are so generic. I know you were trained at the CIA, and you have impeccable culinary taste. Please, help your family this one time. The entire future of the Cole family depends on this dinner." "The future of the family?" I asked, digging deeper into their panic. "It's just a dinner party, Mother. Isn't that a bit dramatic?" "You don't understand, Gavin." Mother's voice sounded as if she was on the verge of tears, her pride completely shattered. Preston's firm is facing some serious liquidity issues. If we don't secure Harrison Thorne's investment before Christmas Eve, the entire family will— Oh my God, I can't explain this over the phone. Just know that if this dinner fails, we are ruined. You are a member of this family, Gavin. You can't just stand by and watch us lose everything, can you?" I stood up, walking toward my floor-to-ceiling glass windows, watching the white snow drift down between the Manhattan skyscrapers. In my mind, the final pieces of my revenge trap had clicked perfectly into place. "All right, Mother," I said, making my voice sound hesitant and reluctant so they wouldn't suspect a thing. "I will come. I will prepare the most magnificent exclusive five-star menu Harrison Thorne has ever tasted." Mother let out a massive, trembling sigh of relief. "Oh, thank you. Gavin, I knew you were a good boy. Please, make sure everything is absolutely perfect. I've emailed you the guest list. And remember to wear a neat, professional black server's outfit. I don't want you looking too flashy or distracting Harrison Thorne from your brother Preston." "I know exactly what to wear, Mother. You can trust me." I smiled coldly and hung up the phone. "Wear a server's outfit?" I whispered, shaking my head. They hadn't changed at all. Even when they were standing on the absolute precipice of financial ruin and begging me for help, they were still terrified that I would overshadow their precious golden boy, Preston. They still wanted me to hide in the dark corner of the kitchen, acting as an invisible servant to feed their empty, decaying pride. But this time, the outfit I chose wouldn't be a stained canvas apron. It would be the bespoke suit of their absolute master. Immediately after hanging up with my mother, I called Marcus Vance. "Marcus, draft the final foreclosure and eviction documents for Oak Ridge Manor. I want every single transfer deed and court-certified eviction order signed and ready in my suit pocket by Christmas Eve." "They are already prepared, Gavin," Marcus replied with a grin. "The entire delinquent debt of the Cole family has been legally transferred to CCG Estates Holdings. The final midnight deadline is December 24th. If they do not pay the overdue $1.2 million in full by midnight, we have the full legal right to foreclose on the mansion and execute an immediate eviction. I've already coordinated with the Greenwich Sheriff's Office. They will have deputies on standby to assist us if needed." "Perfect. And what about Harrison Thorne?" Harrison received Preston's invitation. He was originally going to decline because he knows Preston's projects are incredibly risky, but I told him that you would be personally cooking and that we have a massive surprise waiting for him. The moment Harrison heard your name, he immediately agreed to attend. He is dying to know what kind of game you're playing." Marcus laughed. "Thanks, Marcus. Book me a luxury suite at the Delamar in Greenwich Harbor for the night of the 23rd. I want to be in town early to ensure everything is flawless." December 24th arrived, bringing with it the biting, freezing cold of a New England winter. The historic Tudor mansion of Oak Ridge Manor stood on a small hill in Greenwich, beautifully decorated with thousands of warm golden lights and green pine wreaths wrapped around the grand colonial pillars. From the outside, the estate looked like the warm, magnificent home of an incredibly wealthy, prestigious family. But inside, it was nothing but an empty shell, cracking under the crushing weight of millions, in debt. I drove up to the mansion at 2 in the afternoon. The trunk of my car was loaded with the finest, most luxurious ingredients transported directly from CCG's exclusive purveyors in New York. Live Maine lobsters, A5 Wagyu beef imported from Miyazaki, white truffles from Alba, and incredibly rare bottles of Chateau Margaux 1996. The moment I stepped through the back kitchen door, Mother was already waiting, pacing back and forth anxiously, checking her Rolex. "Gavin, why are you just getting here? Harrison Thorne and our guests will be here at 7. Do you have any idea how important tonight is? Get into the kitchen and start prepping." She glanced at the crates of premium ingredients I was bringing in, her eyes widening in shock as she noticed the exclusive CCG branding on the boxes. Oh my God. All of this, how on earth did you afford these luxury ingredients? That bottle of Chateau Margaux is worth thousands of dollars. Gavin, you didn't steal these from the restaurant where you work, did you? I let out a cold, calm smile, carrying the crates past her. Don't worry, Mother. Everything is completely legal. I promised I would prepare a 5-star dinner for the family, and I am a man of my word. Preston walked into the kitchen, looking incredibly sharp in his black tuxedo, his hair slicked back with expensive gel. He glared at me with a look of arrogant authority, trying to hide the desperate anxiety in his eyes. "Gavin, you better not screw up tonight. If Mr. Harrison Thorne is pleased with the dinner and signs the $5 million investment deal with my firm, I'll throw you a generous bonus. It might even be enough for you to open a tiny, pathetic bakery in Brooklyn. But if you ruin this, I swear to God, I will personally throw you out of this family forever." I stopped chopping, looking directly into Preston's eyes. His gaze carried the desperate, fragile bravado of a ruined man trying to pretend he still ruled the world. "Preston," I said, my voice smooth and chillingly calm, "I promise you that tonight you will get exactly what you deserve. Now go focus on welcoming Harrison Thorne." "Good. See that you remember that," Preston sneered, turning on his heel and walking back out to the grand foyer to join our father. I turned back to the kitchen. I put on my pristine custom white CCG chef's jacket and tied the heavy gray canvas apron. I lit the stoves, the blue flames roaring to life. The steady rhythmic sound of my knife hitting the oak cutting board filled the kitchen. The rich aroma of garlic butter, searing wagyu, and baking tarts began to drift through the house. I worked with absolute Zen-like focus. Cooking had always been my sanctuary, my passion. But tonight, every plate I crafted was not just a work of art. It was a stepping stone, lifting my family up to the absolute peak of hope, right before I pulled the rug out from under their feet. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doorbell of the Greenwich Mansion rang, signaling the arrival of the most important guest of the night. Harrison Thorne stepped into the grand foyer in a tailored dark suit, accompanied by his 2 personal assistants. My father, Mother Preston, and his wife Bianca immediately rushed to greet him with overly eager handshakes and obsequious smiles. "Welcome, Mr. Thorne. It is an absolute honor for the Cole family to host you in our home on Christmas Eve," Father said, his voice dripping with deep respect. "I heard there was a very special dinner being prepared tonight," Harrison Thorne said, with a knowing, subtle smile, his eyes darting toward the kitchen door. "I am very much looking forward to it." "Absolutely, sir." Preston eagerly cut in, puffing out his chest proudly. "We hired an extremely talented private 5-star chef to design an exclusive menu just for you tonight. I guarantee you will be absolutely blown away." The dinner began at 7:30 in the grand dining room. Everyone sat around the massive table, decorated with aromatic candles and festive green wreaths. The first course was served. Maine lobster bisque poached in garlic butter and topped with white truffle foam. Harrison Thorne took a spoonful of the bisque, tasting it carefully. Instantly, his eyes lit up with sheer amazement. He nodded in high approval. Magnificent. The depth of this lobster bisque, the balance of the rich garlic butter and the earthy truffle foam is absolutely flawless. I have eaten lobster bisque at Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris, but this is on a completely different level. Your private chef is an absolute genius. Mother Meredith beamed with radiant pride, quickly taking credit. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Thorne. We always maintain the highest standards of culinary luxury in our home. We are so glad our chef has pleased your sophisticated palate." The second course was served, pan-seared A5 Miyazaki Wagyu beef with a red wine reduction made from Chateau Margaux 1996, served alongside velvety Yukon Gold potatoes. Harrison Thorne cut a piece of the beef, which literally melted like butter in his mouth. He gasped in admiration. "This is unbelievable. The sear on this Wagyu, and this red wine reduction, if I'm not mistaken, is made from a rare 1996 Chateau Margaux, isn't it? Only a chef with deep knowledge and access to the world's most elite wine cellars could create a sauce like this." Preston, who was already slightly tipsy from the expensive wine, began to boast arrogantly, trying to boost his own financial credibility in front of Thorne. "You have an incredible palate, Mr. Thorne," Preston laughed. "Actually, the chef preparing this meal isn't some expensive hire. It's actually my younger brother, Gavin Cole. The kid, well, he doesn't have the financial brains or the high-powered Wall Street career that I do. But he's got a little hobby for cooking. He's currently working as a line cook at a small restaurant in New York. He's always been stubborn, refusing our parents' career advice, so he's stuck working in manual labor to get by. But since you were coming tonight, I personally demanded he drive up and stand over the stove to show you our family's hospitality." Mother joined in, letting out a condescending laugh behind her hand. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. We actually refer to Gavin as our little disappointment. The boy is so stubborn, always hiding away in a smoky kitchen. But at least tonight, he's doing something useful to support his older brother's big business merger." Harrison Thorne sat frozen. His glass of wine stopped halfway to his lips. His warm, friendly face instantly turned cold and rigid. His eyes widened in absolute shock, which rapidly turned into boiling rage as he listened to Meredith and Preston publicly humiliate the chef who had just cooked for them. "Excuse me?" Harrison Thorne slammed his wineglass down on the mahogany table, making the crystal silverware clang loudly. The entire dining room instantly fell into a dead, terrifying silence. My parents, Preston and Bianca, stared at the billionaire, their faces turning pale with sudden fear. "Did you just say the chef who cooked this meal is Gavin Cole? And you just called him a line cook and a little disappointment?" Harrison Thorne demanded, his voice trembling with anger. Preston felt a cold chill run down his spine, nodding nervously. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, he's just a cook in New York. Is there something wrong with the food?" "You absolute fools," Harrison Thorne roared, standing up so fast his glass nearly tipped over. My parents, Preston, and Bianca shook with fear under his furious gaze. "Do you have any idea who you are talking about?" Harrison Thorne shouted, looking at Preston with utter disgust. "The Gavin Cole you just dismissed as a lowly line cook is the founder, chairman, and majority shareholder of Cole Culinary Group, CCG. His company owns 3 Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan, operates dozens of high-end dining spots across the country, and is the exclusive $100 million partner, taking over all my luxury hotel dining concepts in Europe." The dining room became so silent you could hear a pin drop. Mother sat frozen, her eyes wide, her silver fork slipping from her hand and hitting her porcelain plate with a painful clang. My father, Charles, choked on his breath, his entire body trembling in disbelief. And Preston, he was so shocked, his hand shook, spilling his expensive red wine across the white linen tablecloth, leaving a dark, wet stain that looked like a dry blood stain under the crystal chandelier. He whispered, his voice cracking. "Mr. Thorne, what are you saying? Gavin is the chairman of CCG? That's impossible. He's just a cook. Do you honestly think a broke-line cook could afford to bring $1,000 bottles of 1996 Chateau Margaux and fresh Alba white truffles to cook for you?" Harrison Thorne sneered with absolute contempt. "You are the most superficial, arrogant, ignorant people I have ever met. You publicly humiliate your genius, self-made billionaire son, all while worshipping a pathetic, fraudulent venture capitalist who is about to face federal SEC charges." Right on cue, the kitchen door slowly swung open. I walked into the dining room. I wasn't wearing the cheap black server's outfit my mother had demanded. I was wearing a bespoke, charcoal 3-piece suit hand-tailored by Savile Row, the exact suit I had prepared. I hadn't put a single ounce of makeup on my face. The red port wine stain birthmark on my neck was fully visible under the brilliant light of the baccarat crystal chandelier. But tonight, it didn't look like a shameful defect. It looked like a badge of honor on a man who had conquered the world on his own terms. Harrison Thorne saw me, immediately walked over, and shook my hand with deep respect in front of my frozen family. "Gavin, it is an absolute honor to taste your genius tonight. I am deeply sorry you had to endure this pathetic display from your own family. I shook Harrison's hand, offering a calm, relaxed smile. Thank you, Harrison. It's not your fault. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening. I slowly turned to face my parents and Preston. The three of them stood frozen, their faces pale, distorted with absolute shock and horror. The winter storm outside continued to howl, but inside the dining room, the real storm was about to hit. Gavin, you are actually the chairman of Cole Culinary Group? My mother's voice shook violently. She took a step toward me, a desperate fake smile instantly appearing on her cold, pale face. I knew it. Oh my God, I always told your father that you were our most brilliant, resilient son. Don't you see, Charles? Our youngest son has built a massive culinary empire. We are so incredibly proud of you, Gavin. My father quickly stood up from his chair, rushing toward me with an eager, pleading hand, his voice thick with desperate flattery. That's right, Gavin. You kept such an incredible secret from us. The chairman of CCG. What an honor for the Cole family name. Preston, come over here and congratulate your brother. We are family, after all. This was all just a silly misunderstanding. I stepped back, easily avoiding my father's hand. My eyes remained cold, staring at the two of them as they performed the most pathetic, shameless display of fake affection I had ever seen. Father, mother, I said, my voice completely flat but cold as ice, instantly cutting them off. You can stop acting now. I am no longer the naive 20-year-old kid who stood in the driveway watching Preston get a Range Rover, while I received a laminated $2 bill. I am no longer the unpaid private chef who stood in your kitchen, cooking 12-course meals only to be forced to eat cold leftovers in the pantry. I looked over at Preston, who was trembling next to the table, sweat dripping down his forehead. And I am no longer the little disappointment you can snap your fingers at in front of your Wall Street friends, Preston. Preston lowered his head in terror, his body shaking, unable to say a single word. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored Savile Row suit, pulled out a thick legal document stamped with the red seal of the Greenwich Court, and tossed it onto the center of the dinner table. Charles, Preston, open the folder. My father's hands shook as he opened the document. The moment his eyes scanned the first page, the color drained completely from his face. He collapsed back into his mahogany chair, gasping for air. What is this? A foreclosure order from CCG Estates Holdings? The mortgage deed of Oak Ridge Manor. Why is the company holding our $4.2 million debt? A subsidiary of your company, Gavin? Mother gasped, grabbing the folder from my father's hands, her eyes scanning the pages frantically. No, this can't be real, Gavin. You are our creditor? You own the mortgage to our home? Yes, I replied coldly. The historic Oak Ridge Manor that you always bragged about as the Cole family heritage was fully mortgaged by Preston 6 months ago to cover up his fraudulent investments. My company bought the delinquent debt from the private bank. Midnight tonight is the final legal deadline to pay the overdue $1.2 million. It is currently 9 o'clock, and I am willing to bet Preston doesn't have a single dollar left in his accounts. Mother panicked, lunging forward and grabbing my sleeve, weeping hysterically. Gavin, my son, you can't do this to your own parents. This is our home, our dignity in Greenwich. If you take our house, where will we go? What will the people at the country club say? You are Preston's brother. Help him this one time. Just agree to extend the loan. I coldly removed her hand from my expensive suit jacket. When I was working 80 hours a week, with bleeding fingers and burned arms in a damp Brooklyn basement, did you ever remember I was your son? When you gave me a laminated $2 bill while driving a $100,000 car, did you ever remember I needed help? When you called me a little disappointment in front of hundreds of people at the Brayburn Club just to make Preston look good, did you ever consider me family? Mother froze, sobbing hysterically, unable to find an answer. My father turned to Harrison Thorne, his voice begging. Mr. Thorne, please help us. Preston's resort project. If you just sign the $5 million investment deal, we can use the cash to pay off Gavin. Harrison Thorne looked at Charles and Preston with absolute cold contempt. Charles, I am a businessman, and I only invest in viable projects and reputable people. Your son Preston is a financial fraud, and your family is the most superficial, cruel group of people I have ever met. I would never invest a single dollar in people who trample on their own blood for empty vanity. Our business discussions are officially over. I am also withdrawing all my trust funds from your firm immediately. Harrison turned to me, offering a respectful smile. Gavin, I think I should leave you to handle your family. The dinner tonight was absolutely exquisite. I'll see you at the CCG headquarters in Manhattan on Monday morning. Thank you, Harrison. Have a wonderful Christmas Eve, I said, escorting him to the door. After Harrison left, the dining room fell into a heavy, dark silence. Bianca, Preston's snobbish wife, had already packed her luxury suitcases. She walked down the stairs, pulled off her massive diamond engagement ring, and threw it directly at Preston's face. Preston, you are a bankrupt fraud. I am not staying with a man who doesn't even have a roof over his head. I'm filing for divorce. Bianca dragged her suitcases out the front door, slamming it behind her. I stood at the head of the table, checking my watch. It was exactly 12 o'clock. The historic grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime, signaling the official start of Christmas Day. Midnight, I said calmly. The deadline has passed, and I haven't received a single dime from Preston. I pulled out my phone and dialed a quick number. Sheriff Thompson, you can come in now. The grand front door immediately opened. The Greenwich sheriff, along with 3 deputies, stepped into the foyer, carrying official court-certified foreclosure and eviction notices. Mr. Charles Cole, Preston Cole, we have a court order to secure this property under the request of CCG Estates Holdings. All your family assets have been frozen. You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises immediately. Meredith let out a painful, hysterical shriek, collapsing onto the floor, while my father stared blankly as the deputies began placing official foreclosure seals on the historic oak walls. Preston sat paralyzed on the hardwood floor, staring blankly at the ruined dinner table covered in spilled red wine. I walked over to the table, picked up my glass of Chateau Margaux, took one final satisfying sip, and looked down at my mother and brother. Father, Mother, Preston, have a very warm Christmas. Consider tonight's dinner my final parting gift to the Cole family. I turned on my heel and walked out of the mansion. My Jeep Grand Cherokee was already running in the driveway, its headlights cutting through the thick New England snow. I got in, pressed the gas, and drove south toward New York City, back to my warm Tribeca penthouse, back to my flourishing culinary empire, and most importantly, back to where I truly belonged. In the rearview mirror, the grand Tudor mansion of Oak Ridge Manor faded into the falling snow, officially closing the darkest chapter of my life, and opening a future that was proud, free, and entirely my own. The truth is, revenge is never just about making someone pay. Sometimes, the greatest victory is walking away knowing that the people who tried to destroy you were defeated by their own choices, because in the end, betrayal reveals people's true colors, and patience reveals the truth. But what would you have done if you were in this situation? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have made sure justice was served? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy powerful stories about betrayal, secrets, and unexpected revenge, subscribe for more unforgettable stories coming your way.